Welcome to Well Played Podcast, the show on all things playful and joyous in education. Well Played is part of the On Podcast Media Network. I'm your host, Michael Matera, 6th grade teacher, author, and motivational speaker. Best of all, Dad. And today's show, we have Charlie Mirus with us, and we are excited to get started talking all about student relationships near and far, sort of during this situation right now, as well as things we can use when we go back into the classroom. Before we get started, Charlie, can you give everybody who's new to the show kind of a brief rundown of you?
Sure. I am Charlie Mirus, and I am an 8th grade ELA teacher outside of the Cincinnati area at Loveland Middle School. And I've been doing gamification for about 2.5 years, but this is my 15th year teaching.
Nice. Well, it's good to have you back on the show. I love repeat guests. I think it's just fun to have like the community sort of grow and get everybody to know each other. And so many people in the Explore Like a Pirate community have just such wonderful ideas. They're great giving people, and I love connecting with people here. And like I said, kind of having the repeat guest.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, like the XP Lab chats, I've actually been able to make some while we've been kind of like locked up. I haven't been having to wake up as early and
That's
stuff
right.
like that. And no, it's been amazing.
That's right. Well, everybody that's tuning in, you can check this episode out on my YouTube channel. This is episode 159. That's season 4, episode 3. Hope you guys check it out. And if you want to drop either of us sort of a comment, that's a place that we both kind of look and see if anybody has any questions, comments, whatever. Love to hear from you guys. All right, so let's dive into today's episode here on student relationships near and far, probably starting here with the far, right? We have this situation where we built such great relationships with our students because this all happened in the sort of fourth quarter of our school year. And so we already had these like thriving relationships, and now all of a sudden we're at a distance. We're doing this distance learning thing, and none of I shouldn't say none of us, but most of us aren't trained in that. And I think even the experts in that area kind of say that is one of the hardest pieces, is to have that human-to-human connection in a digital environment. So, and then we have the extra layer of already having those relationships, which is a blessing and a curse, right? Blessing that the kids know us and we know the kids, but a bit of a curse. They're expecting that same relationship.
Yeah, I agree. And the hard, it's not only they're expecting that same relationship that they are, but we are too. And so, and kind of going into it, like, maybe not expecting it, but, wanting to have that same kind of relationship. And now, at least how our school is operating, we're doing live, like Google Meets twice a week, so that they don't overlap with other classes. And so I get like 25 to 30 minutes with each of my preps on there with the different levels I teach. And by the time that you go through content about things, and we're, everybody's told to mute their mics so that their, screen doesn't show up. And when my screen's supposed to be showing up, and at the end of the 25 minutes, it's like, okay, any questions? Bye. Like, I mean, that's been the hardest, part about it, is that I just like you did, I'm sure, have inside jokes, with like 80% of your students or something, that you knew you were going to talk with them about almost every single day, to going to,
let's get down to business.
Yeah.
I mean, our school has gone to 30-minute classes. And like you said, 30 minutes. We both teach middle school. Those relationships are huge. Middle school is an awkward set of grades, like where I think elementary can kind of get down to business. Students are ready and excited for school. High school, there's a lot more of that college pressure. So like, I think kids, for better or worse, are more accepting of the fact that like we have to do this and we're going to get through this stuff. Middle school, I had it once described as we are like air traffic controllers, really just trying to make sure no one bumps into each other. But like,
it's a really good analogy.
But that speaks to the relationship of it. Like middle school kids are going through puberty. There's just so many changes. Their cognitive abilities are like going, turning on and off throughout the whole time of middle school. And we as teachers, you need to have that relationship side. You need to have those inside jokes, like you're saying, like where maybe like an accountant or a bean counter would say like that's a waste of time and that's inefficient. There's no way you could get through school just being pure like content, pure like focus without that relationship piece. But when you have a 30-minute online class, I mean, either you've reduced the content to telling them like a sentence, like Rome is a
Right.
city in Italy. There's my content for today. Then I have time to build relationships, or I actually teach them something meaningful about Rome. But then that's 15, 20 minutes of doing something. One way I have, so I'm 3 weeks in. This next week will start our fourth week of distance learning. And a thing that I have arrived late to the party. I will fully admit, people, I'm probably going to give this suggestion and people are going to be like, really? But I used Nearpod this week, and that has really changed my distance learning because now everyone can interact. Like the first few times I did lessons where, I mean, I tried to run it like my classroom. I would like call on kids, but that really meant, 3 kids, 4 kids are participating and the rest are just sitting there in front of their video screens, like kind of bored.
Yeah.
This way, like everyone has to answer some questions. Everyone gets to like do little fun things. So in my Nearpod, I made a few slides where I would teach them about Rome. We were learning about the triumvirate, this like alliance, this power-hungry alliance. And there were 3 people, obviously. And then the next slide came up. They had to make a T-shirt. So I put a graphic of like a blank T-shirt. They had to draw a T-shirt supporting one of the people, but they had like 2.5 minutes. So it was like quick and fun. It wasn't like trying to be this big, like show me that you know all the content. So it was more board game-esque. Like you have 30 seconds or 90 seconds or whatever to do this quick drawing. But to see all the kids kind of light up, because that is a little closer to how I'd run my classroom. I might not do it through something like Nearpod, but there would be these little funny activities, these quick challenges. That really changed things when I switched to doing Nearpod.
I think that's a great idea. I was thinking about doing something similar with a similar product with Pear Deck. Kind of offers a very similar thing. As far as that goes, and just trying to figure out how to work it in, because like you said, it's a situation where students are so used to the way that they interact with our content when we're in our own classroom that it's hard to do that. I mean, we would typically break into, they're already sitting with their factions, their teams, and they would do some kind of quick intro activity or something like that, and that's kind of gone away as far as that goes.
Yeah, I mean, right. So that's the big piece. Like we're sitting here trying to think, how can we relate and act in a similar fashion than we did in our classrooms?
Right. And so in relation to that, one of the things that we do every day in my class at the beginning is a random event. They're done through Classcraft, but you can just kind of change them however you want them to be. And you can, it's a fun kind of like intro activity. Sometimes one that I really like selfishly is Ode to the Game Master. They have in their teams, they have to write like a 5 minute, they have 5 minutes to write a poem about how great I am. So it's nothing like forced flattery, right?
That's awesome.
But yeah, but doing ELA, it works, well into things, and that would work, for anybody. But I knew that doing something like that wasn't gonna, be possible. So I tried doing this thing that I've called like the Royal Decree. So every day on their Google Classroom, I post it looks like a scroll, and it's themed out like my game and everything. But it lets them know that King Geoffrey, the king of legendary Loveland in my game, has asked them to do a certain thing. So like the first day, it was to take a picture with a relative or their pet or something like that. And I got some, people that participated, but they have only until like that day to do it. So that way they have to be checking in on their things, and that way they can, kind of relate to me. By the end of the week, I did them Monday through Thursday this week. By the end of the week, they had to do an opportunity to take a video of a talent that they had. And that was really cool. So I had more students do it then. And I got to see, the side, selfishly the side that I like to see, which is, what do our kids do when they're not doing schoolwork? Now, of course, now they have a lot of time to do things, but there's only so many places they can. But I had a student that showed me how she could spin I knew she was really good at basketball, but she spun a basketball on all 5 fingers. for example, like
Nice.
one from thumb straight to the pointer finger to the ring finger, like all the way down. Yeah, exactly. It's really cool. I had another student that has told me over and over again that she does gymnastics, but she did like a like back handspring like layout kind of. I don't know all the terminology, but she did like a whole like run like she would do on a floor exercise.
That's awesome
Um,
because that's like building that relationship that, in some respects, you're leveraging the fact that we have this digital space to learn things you wouldn't have. Those would have been just mere conversations, is my point, right? Somebody would have said, "Yeah, I did a gymnastics meet this weekend," and you might have said, like, "Oh, can you do one of those like flippy black flips?" And they would have said, "Yep." But like
yeah,
here, you got to actually see it and then
right.
be able to comment back if you want. Like that's that's a different type of relationship that we couldn't do before because those would have just been mere conversations. So, there are some benefits and changes that are kind of good, I guess. And you leaning into them, I like this idea of these King's Decree. I've been doing something similar. So each of my assignments come with an additional Realm of Nobles option, and I tried to keep them small. They can sometimes relate. So sometimes the assignment might be write like a summary, and maybe like the thing that follows is like draw a picture of like what we saw. So it really matches. Sometimes it doesn't match at all, and it's like you're saying, like go do this thing, and but it's now they know that there's these chances to earn some points. And at first I was like, should I do that or not? Because that really shifts how my game works a little bit. But I decided there are so many ways they can earn XP in my class that are easy, that
Mhm.
aren't always side quests, that aren't always. And right now, that almost has gone away because I don't have the classroom. They're not in my classroom. I can't have those relational moments. I can't do a little quick challenge or say like, "Hey, if the room's fully picked up and chairs pushed in today because like it's been sloppy, I'm gonna give 400 XP to the house." Right? Like there's those moments that I just conjure up and make on the fly. It's not in my lesson plan
Right.
all the time to earn some points, all the time to also build relationships because when they do it, you kind of high five and like, "This is awesome, good job, guys." And all of that's missing. So I decided that these arguably easy tasks to earn points that I would never really count as a side quest, and that's really what they are. They're additional tasks they're doing outside class, so it's totally another side quest.
Right.
But the barrier, the entry here is a lot lower. The effort has to be a lot lower, but it gives you a chance to high five some kids and digitally.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a great way to look at it because one of my I probably end up doing it with my class like two or three times throughout the entire year, but maybe a little bit more. But when we do have those extra like couple minutes or something like that, we'll do like the lowest number game like that's mentioned in your Explore Like a Pirate game
Yep.
or Explore Like a Pirate book. And it's so interesting to see like the first time that they do that and try to figure out the lowest number that they're going to pick between zero and infinity. That has to be a whole number, etc. That nobody else picks. And by the time that you get to later on in the year, they've got like a strategy to it. All of a sudden, it's just like
Oh yeah.
two seems to be winning. Nobody's picking like everybody's like oh well, zero won the last time. I can't believe it actually won. So like half the class picked zero the next time. It's just like yeah, you got to see it's coming, guys. Like
I love it.
yeah. So another way that I've kind of I've tried to engage some students, and it's been a little slow going, but for ELA at least is through this product called Storium Edu. It's Storium Edu.
I created an account. I've
I
built.
saw that you created an account because you had a story world, I think, at some
That's
point.
right.
Yeah,
I built some cards. I have yet to roll it out with these kiddos yet. So
yeah,
I'd love to hear your take, your idea.
yes. So I used it last year at the beginning of the year at one point, and it was really easy to get students into it because I was there to sell it. I was there to
Yeah.
be the salesperson kind of thing as far as this goes. At this point, I've actually reached out to like a group, like two different groups of 4 or 5 students, and just said like, hey, you guys came to mind about this. So just real quick, what it is, it's a story writing platform, but they do collaborative story writing. So it's got a gamification aspect where they get put into a scenario and they draw cards about things, and they have to use the different cards to help tell the story. But I reached out to those students, and they're in the process of establishing their game, and I'm hoping that once those students then talk to some other students about how fun it is, that it'll kind of like carry over as
Yeah,
far as that
catch
goes.
on. That's nice.
Yeah. So that's been, one kind of way that I've tried to not only build the relationships with them as far as, hey, I recognize I know this is a story writing thing. You're talented in that. You'll enjoy that. I think you'd be good at it. But also that they can work with each other.
Nice. I dig that. That's pretty awesome.
Because I think that's the hard. And another hard part is that we don't have those relationships, but they don't either. And people will say, well, students, even in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, etc., they can just call each other up or they can FaceTime each other. And yeah, but are they making the effort to do so with the student with those other than those two or three best friends?
Yeah.
They're not, probably.
No, and like as a social studies teacher, I always joke that like part of my job is the social part. Like I'm trying to teach you to be a good member of society, which doesn't just mean your four friends. Like
right.
It means everybody. So like designing activities that make kids sort of work together is important. And then coaching them through how to be successful. That's a whole nother topic. That could be both a topic for in class and on this digital space. That's become harder. One way I sort of continued to do relationship building in my class now is I actually have, I don't know about your school, but again, my class times got reduced to 30 minutes, which really does mean my work day is shorter. I mean, like now I have a ton of work. I mean, creating a digital lesson has taken me a lot longer than just showing up to school and talking about Rome. When you've had the same job for 12 years, like I can pretty much go no lesson plan and still be a pretty good lesson plan.
Right. Oh, for sure. But I think that's one of the things I don't want to say that people, don't understand, because our community has been really appreciative about it. The parent feedback, we sent out different, surveys about it. And I mean, it's just been like through the roof, like high 90s, 100%, like even on some different things as far as like, how the parents are reaching out or the teachers are reaching out to the parents, how like we're doing with our designing of our lessons. But it does take, longer.
It does take longer. But as now I'm moving into week 4, just like anything, like I'm starting to get a nice pace. Like now that I'm using Nearpod and now that I'm using Nearpod more, like the ideas to create doesn't take as long. Like the first time I was like, well, maybe I'll try this. And then I like tested it and I didn't like it. You know what I mean? So now that you've tested it and you understand its features, you can quickly sort of grab the right tool. So as those things have gotten a little faster, a little easier, I thought like, how can I build relationships with my students? And how can I give some of my time? I mean, because technically, like, this is the school's time. This is, like, their time. And so I decided to run a few Jackbox games. I don't know if you ever played Jackbox games. They're...
Oh, yeah, I have. Like, you don't know Jack? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So they've run some really spectacular sales during all of this. So if you haven't done so, check it out.
Okay.
And then what you do is you can use something like this, like Skype or whatever, or FaceTime or whatever, and you could project, if you will, the game board up, and then they use another device or the same device with a different tab to sort of answer trivia questions, draw funny things. These games they're all party games.
Right.
But I've been doing that with my advisees close to once a week. We didn't start that first week, so I can't say that it's exactly once a week, but they've been loving it. And I guess this is my other point. I have also continued to run Game Club, and that's open to everyone in my school. And we've been doing different board games that you can play off the same dice. So you think Yahtzee, but only one of us rolls, and we all place the same dice. But you can play some different ways, right? But one thing I've noticed, and this actually harkens back to a lot of gamification research, the sort of specialty of offering something to my advisees, and these are the ones I've done my Jackbox games with. I had about 10 advisees show up. I only have 17 advisees, so I've had more than half of my advisees show up to that Game Club that's open to all 320 students or whatever. I had like 4 show up. So it's interesting, like when we talk about building relationships, think sometimes exclusivity, because that exclusivity means there's a tribe there. So like if you were to offer something only to your 5th period, and yes, you're going to rotate around and offer something to your 3rd period and something, but instead of just saying I'm offering all of this to my 8th grade Englishes, like that may seem not as like ooh, and so then the draw to just do Netflix instead kicks in, because I'm offering this extra, which means they don't have to go. There's no reason, like they don't have to do these things. But when you
Yeah,
offer that like specialty, when like, hey, third period, this is for you guys, all of a sudden maybe you get half a third period, and that's a lot better than 4 people out of 300.
which is interesting, and I think that it's that exclusivity like you're talking about. But and part of the reason why is because, like you were saying with the, I'll just do Netflix instead, is he even going to notice that I'm not there?
Correct.
Kind
Like
of
if there's
feeling,
300, and it's always like
right?
when you offer it up to that many, there's always like the easy to hide factor. Like I am sure other kids are going to come, so
Yes,
I don't need to
exactly.
come. But if everybody says that, then
Right.
4 kids show up.
I really like Mr. Myers. I really like Mr. Matera, and I see that he's, they're giving some extra effort into things because they recognize that is like an extra thing. Like,
Yep.
Even in, sixth grade or below, they'll recognize like when there's extra things. My kindergarten daughter recognizes when, her teacher does something extra. So, but there is that aspect where it's like, but so and so is gonna, go there and it's gonna be okay. And I did the same thing because it totally makes sense now, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because I ran I wanted to run an all society, so that means all my classes gym kit on there. And I said it's going to be some vocab, but it's mostly going to be fun things. There's going to be some trivia about Disney and various different kind of just fun things or whatever. And I had like 22 show up out of 137, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I was in my head like I literally even had I had asked the student to do the play-by-play, like so that he could do the voiceover as he was watching it and kind of like a sports game and stuff like that. And I was like, it's going to be massive. There's going to be like 60, 70 students or whatever. I had as many as a regular bell. Like, it is.
Yeah.
I was glad that they showed up. Don't get me wrong, but it was a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think a lot of us teachers are dealing with and struggling with when we talk about these relationships. It's hard not to take that absence personal. And I think we all have to tell ourselves, all of us, kids and adults, are grieving. Kids and adults are every day. We're not in sync, right? Like, this idea, this notion of a Monday being a Monday and a Friday being a Friday, like super excited. That's gone for everybody.
Right.
And so we're almost on different cycles. So some kids show up to your gym kit and it's like a Friday to them and they're excited. But there are kids that day that's like a Monday to them, and they're bummed and they're sad because of the world, because of this, because of that, because they stayed up too late last night watching Netflix. Who knows? But that's just it. Like every day is sort of a weekend, and every day is sort of a work day. I mean, it's like all mashed together.
And I think and that kind of brings up like another point too, is that we've as a department, as eighth grade English teachers, we've decided to do this like weekly reflection, kind of thing. At the end of the week, and one of the questions on there is like, hey, what went well this week? Or you have a bunch of different options of different questions that you can pick from. And that's actually a reminder, because we're talking about like near and far, like even when we're like back into like the classroom, that's something that I had done in my previous job for a while. Like we, just called them like weekly check-ins. And I can't remember if I did them on Mondays or Fridays, as far as that goes, or maybe I did them on Thursdays, just so I had them before the students went home for the weekend. And I mean, the feedback on there, like you got some pretty deep, stuff that's going on. Some of them are just like, yeah, everything's going well, but some of them are on there like, I can't stand, they're doing the remote learning, and it's been really hard because there's 4 of us kids and we're all using the same internet, and all of a sudden you're getting a glimpse into like what you're talking about as far as, what's going through their mind. And that's just as important once we get back into the brick and mortar classroom, is knowing what's going through the minds. And so many students are so much, in my experience, more willing to put things down as far as on paper, typing it up, than they are to just come up and, tell you.
Yeah. I think it's awesome that you've given kids a space to share that, right? And that's a great tip for those of you that are listening out there. I think we all have to think a little more about the social emotional, even though like we may be lamenting our content, even if your content is really scoped and sequenced out. I mean, I think about math and English are 2 subjects that are, at least in our school district, very scope and sequence. So like there is this pressure of like, we are missing a quarter of content, and that will impact next year's class, which will impact next year's class, which will, like there are
Right.
possibly for something like math, implications for kids that are in sixth grade for their senior year. I mean, like,
Right.
there
At
are
some
some.
point, those things all have to, like, we talk about a year's worth of growth, kind of thing is one lap around the track. At some point, like, you will need to gain some of those, laps back. And the only silver line that I can think of, about it is that sometimes teachers, that I've worked with will lament, like, I feel like they didn't, almost gather anything that they were, supposed to from last year. It's just like, well, at least a little bit of a part of it, for this year. As far as that, it's like you can't exclusively blame it on the previous year's teachers anymore. Like,
Yeah, I think too. I hope. I'm always a firm believer that just life itself. I mean, this is one of the reasons I get into this idea of playful and joyous learning. I think our modern world, especially at K-12, has somewhat leaned too heavily on the science of education and not the art of education. And with that, we have a belief that our scope and sequence is perfect, and if we dole education out in these little 12 increments, they will leave math experts because we've like doled it out perfectly. And I don't mean to pick on math, but it's just something that there are so many micro skills you can scope and sequence it out really nicely. Um, but I hope that what this shows us though is actually that there ends up not being a gap. That actually, kids being creative at home, kids cooking more at home, that actually, like, I don't want to like reduce school to this, but sometimes I think of school as just a mental gymnasium. K-12, none of these are actually your job skills. Like, we're all going to have to like bone up on whatever we choose as our career.
right.
So really,
I
it's
mean,
about
there's
it's
a
a
lot of training on the fly, like whatever job you go into, and you might be able to relate something back or use a skill in a different way from when you were in school. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, people are not. I always tell people, like, we're teaching Shakespeare right now. I don't anticipate you using Shakespeare in your everyday career for the most part. Like, maybe one out of my 137 students may have to do that at some point, but they do have to use like the skills that we teach them. Like, it's like what you always say, and what a lot of teachers always say is we teach students, we teach kids,
Yeah.
and
See,
we use our content in order to teach them.
yeah, for me, like Shakespeare's a perfect example. That is to me a great thing to point out for my notion of like it's just a mental gymnasium.
Yeah.
It's not so much that Shakespeare is going to be used or not used. Maybe it becomes the coolest thing in 50 years and it's going to be used all the time. Who cares if it is or isn't? The exercise of doing that, just like,
Yeah.
I mean, I can share research about like doing puzzles and like playing board games has like a huge impact on your ability to focus, your ability to like, it increases your ability to hold and maintain cognitive loads at higher functions. Like, amazing, right? But like, there is no content being taught. It's just a mental exercise. And reading Shakespeare and answering your questions the way you want them answered, or your essays the way you want them written, the odds that your essays are actually going to like perfectly help them when they end up getting a job is like close to 0%.
Oh yeah.
But it's the mental exercise. What
The
does
process
he
of
want?
everything.
What does he
Yeah.
want? I got to think about what he wants. He's asked for these requirements. Okay, I'm going to try to do these requirements.
I need
Those
to manage
skills.
my time. I have
Yeah,
to be
like
organized. Like,
yeah,
all those different things. And I think that, coming back to the relationship thing, is that when students realize that that is, kind of the case, that they realize that the most important thing is that I'm working through this process of this remote learning kind of situation. I'm still maintaining, as many relationships as I can with teachers, with all of a sudden the relationships with their parents have become astronomically more important than, I mean, they were always very important, and we're both parents, and, we know that that's important. But I mean, in a lot of cases, if their parents are, not like frontline workers, they're working from home, they're around their parents now 24/7.
yeah.
And that, it becomes important as far as that goes, even more.
100%. Well, Charlie, we are hit reflection time. So, you ready for today's quote and your ability to spin it towards relationships?
I am ready. I learned that ability when I was in school, so.
Boom. All right, here you go. This one is unknown author. Without communication, there is no relationship. Without respect, there is no love. Without trust, there is no reason to continue.
I think that's a really important, kind of thing. I think that the when we look at our students and we talk to our students about things is they have to know that we love them, that we respect them, that we value them, and I think that's kind of how I end every each of my digital lessons, kind of things is letting them know I'm like I miss you guys because I think that and I always tell them I'm like you might think it sounds cheesy and maybe you don't, but I don't think that they do. I think they know that it's sincere because of that relationship that we've built all year, long as far as things go. It's no different than when a student was absent and then they come back and be like, man, we missed you yesterday kind of thing. But now it's just an extended kind of, version about that. But, and I think the same, the road goes both ways as far as that goes, that they, respect the situation that we've been put in too, as far as that goes. They trust that we're doing the best that we can and, trying to make all this work.
Nice. For me, I think it's a great reminder for all of us now, as well as in the future, that I'll say it a lot of times on here that relationship's king. I think it's the most important thing. But this quote, I think, does a really good job of breaking down the fact that there are layers to relationships, and communication is just sort of the first layer. So when we go online and we're like, oh, I'm using Zoom or Google Meet and I got all my little boxes and I see all the kids, we are communicating like the relationship's there. But yes, but that is merely like step one of the relationship. Then there's respect, there's love, and there's trust. And like as teachers, we know in our classrooms, all of those are really important to get to that higher level of relationship. And I just hope that we remember that in these digital times, that the communication piece is just layer one.
Yeah, and I think that that's, a good way to kind of look at it too, is because it comes back to kind of what we were talking about. Don't be, hurt or offended or something like that if somebody isn't able to make that digital, lesson, or they're a day late on turning, something in as far as that goes. I've had students that reached out to me and they're just like, oh, I'm doing this, really creative thing and I'm putting this and I'm going above and beyond, but it's not going to be on time. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like you're doing something really creative and you're going above and beyond. Like, sounds great. Turn it in when you got it done, and I think that they feel comfortable reaching out to me is just one way of showing that relationship.
It's huge. It's huge. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Charlie. It was excellent having you back on the show.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Huge thanks to everyone else for participating in the Well Played community. Hopefully you've checked things out like the XP Lab community, which is Tuesdays at 9 Central Standard Time. And I hope you've checked out things like my YouTube channel, where there's all sorts of other great content for you to get, as well as brand new, these global Let's Plays, which I'd love to have you or your family participate in. They're kind of like those games I was saying we could play at Game Club where everyone can play. So check those out, and you can play them. You can watch the lives after the fact and play them, practice up so that you're ready to play when we do a live in the future. All right, everybody, have a great day and play on.